Morning in Grymmwood arrived like an unpaid debt. Loud, unavoidable, and slightly damp. Sunlight trickled through the cracked shutters of the hollow oak tavern, landing directly on my face like it had a personal vendetta. I groaned dramatically, swatting at it like an insulted duke, fending off a common breeze. Beside me, Bok let out a triumphant cluck, his feathers slightly askew, having once again defeated the tavern's moth population in the dead of night. He strutted across the windowsill with the gravitas of a creature who'd seen things. Mostly breadcrumbs and my shame. But things nonetheless. Another day. Another opportunity to rise, shine, and disappoint someone, I muttered, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My boots were where I'd left them. Unevenly. I put them on with the sort of reckless optimism that comes before a twisted ankle, and limped down the creaky stairs to the common room like a man attending his own intervention. The hollow oak was unusually quiet, save for the sound of a broom being swept with the enthusiasm of someone fantasizing it was a battle axe. The scent of wood smoke and overcooked oats hung in the air, comforting if you've never known actual comfort. Talia was already behind the bar, polishing a mug with the intensity of someone mentally compiling a list of all the people she would eject from a second-story window if the law allowed. She didn't look up. "Good morning," I announced, arms wide, as though entering a royal court rather than a breakfast lineup.
"Bozwick,"
she said, voice flat as the mug she was polishing. She gestured toward the counter.
"Here's your breakfast, and a bill for it and your overdue rent. Again."
I looked down at the plate. A slice of burnt toast, half a boiled egg with the expression of someone who regretted being born, and a spoonful of something suspiciously gray. "Talia, my dear," I said, prodding the gray thing with my fork. "Is this edible?"
"It's food."
"For who?"
"Look, if you want something better, don't be late on your rent. Otherwise, you will purposely be served subpar meals."
Ah, there it was. I offered my most dazzling grin, the kind that had only ever worked on tourists and one very nearsighted goat. "You wound me. I am but a humble bard, crafting joy and beauty in an otherwise dreary world."
"You're a freeloader with flair."
"Exactly, flair, which is priceless."
"Which doesn't pay for the room."
"Talia, I swear upon the god of mischief, the coins are as good as in your hand. Today the world shall pay me for my talent."
"Well then, noble bard, go earn your keep,"
she said, crossing her arms. And with that, I set out into the wilds of Grymmwood once more, with Bok perched on my shoulder, and the desperate hope that the day would offer employment. If optimism had a face, it would not be mine. But that didn't stop me from wearing it anyway. "To perform or not to perform," I intoned. "That is the—"
"Oi, Bozwick, still pretending you've got a job?"
I turned to see Calban, a squat, square-shouldered dwarf with a beard so immaculate it looked like it had its own butler. He was perched on a stool outside the hollow oak tavern, tankard in hand and smugness in full bloom.
"Still charming your way through life, I see. And by charming, I mean existing despite the universe's repeated objections."
"Flattery will get you everywhere," I said, adjusting my collar with theatrical flair. "Tell me what brings you out into this radiant morning light, besides the alcohol, of course." He gestured to a flyer nailed to the tavern wall, one I had quite skillfully ignored earlier. It read, "Tonight only, the marvelous Calban the Conjurer. Witness illusions, wonders, and jaw-dropping magical feats. Grymmwood Theatre. Now featuring, maybe you?" I squinted at the last line. "Is that an open call?" Calban snorted.
Nah, that was me running out of space on the flyer, but funny you should mention it. I'm in need of a warm-up act.
My eyes lit up like a miser spotting a dropped coin. Calvin, you wound me. To think I could serve as mere prelude to your mystical theatrics. It would be an honor.
You'll be doing it for 1 gold coin, and only if the crowd doesn't riot.
Only 1 gold coin, I gasped, placing a hand over my chest. You insult me, good sir, but also, yes, I'll take it. I desperately need that coin.
I know. I saw Talia tear a rag to pieces earlier when she mentioned your name about the overdue rent.
Unrelated. That was about a misunderstanding involving the tax collector's visit to collect his share of taxes, and me slipping out of sight to tend to other personal matters. He waved me off.
You perform well, and you get a gold coin. But if you ruin my show, I swear on my beard, you'll wish you were in another profession, in another town, in another life.
Fear not, my kind sir, I said with a deep bow that nearly knocked Buck off my shoulder. Tonight I shall bring tears to their eyes.
Just make sure it's not tears from pain or regret.
With that, the deal was struck. The rest of the day was a blur of dramatic pacing, frantic monologuing, and me running face first into a laundry line while rehearsing my entrance. I practiced sword flourishes using a wooden stick. Buck watched in silence, occasionally clucking disapprovingly. Once he pecked my shin. I took it as direction. By the time the sun began to set, painting the Grymmwood rooftops in hues of gold and fire, I was ready. Probably. I had selected my most dashing outfit, a slightly stained ruffled shirt, doublet of ambiguous color, and a cape that had once been part of a curtain. I strutted to the theater with the solemn pride of a man who just learned what non-refundable meant. You would think a man whose only professional talent is performing might have a natural affinity for the stage. You'd be wrong. I arrived at the Grymmwood Theater precisely 15 minutes before showtime, which is precisely how long it took me to realize I had no script, no props, and no idea what my act was. I had gambled entirely on the raw magnetism of my presence and the confusing appeal of interpretive monologue. The backstage area smelled like dust, egos, and a faint hint of burned rabbit fur. Likely residue from Calvin's last disappearing rabbit incident, which had ended with the rabbit suing for emotional damages. The stagehands looked at me the way to where I was going to meet my executioner one last time.
Bozwick, please, for the love of all that's enchanted, don't F this up.
I patted his shoulder with the confidence of a man who had already accepted failure as part of his identity. Dear dwarf, failure is just success wearing a very convincing disguise. He blinked slowly, like someone trying to remember why they ever trusted me. The house lights dimmed. I was pushed onto the stage by someone who muttered, "Break a leg, yours preferably." The curtain opened. The crowd was substantial. Not packed, but definitely more than I was emotionally prepared for. Mostly locals, hard to impress, quick to heckle. The sort of audience that claps only when someone falls over. I took a deep breath, and promptly tripped over a floorboard. There was an audible thump, followed by a gasp, followed by a cough that sounded suspiciously like laughter. I stood, brushed off my dignity, and began what I had decided would be an impromptu dramatization of the inner workings of a conflicted soul trapped in a world that doesn't understand art. Translation: I rambled dramatically while waving my arms like an air elemental having a tantrum. "Ladies and gentlemen," I proclaimed, "tonight I bring you the tale of a bard, a lonely bard, misunderstood, underpaid, possibly overacting." I attempted a spin, my cape wrapped around my face like an angry scarf. Buck, sensing theatrical death, let out a long, mournful cluck from backstage. "Behold the agony!" I cried, dramatically falling to my knees. "The torment! The overdue tab at the tavern!" Someone in the audience yelled,
Is this a tragedy or an actual cry for help?
"Yes," I answered solemnly. The heckling began immediately and in earnest.
I've seen better performances from drunk roosters.
Come on, bring on the real show.
I tried a backflip. I say tried because what happened was more of a semi-controlled tumble that ended with my face planted in the stage and my boots flying off into the orchestra pit. The final straw came when I attempted to recreate a storm using only my voice and interpretive hand gestures. I knocked over a lantern. A stagehand screamed. A minor fire started in a prop barrel, which Calvin extinguished with a puff of glittery smoke and a string of curses not suitable for children, monks, or parrots. When I exited the stage, the silence was deafening. Calvin stood waiting, arms crossed, eyes twitching. "Well," I said cheerfully, "we made memories." He blinked at me.
Bozwick, you set the props on fire.
A creative spark, some might say.
You brought my rabbit out early.
She was demanding more stage time.
You wore your cape on backwards.
Fashion is subjective. He let out a groan that sounded like it had been stored for years. Then, with all the fury of a disappointed uncle, he pointed toward the exit.
Out, now!
But my coin. He leaned in.
For what? You ruined everything for me. Get out now!
And so, I walked, back through the alleys of Grymmwood. I pushed open the door to the Hollow Oak Tavern, with the enthusiasm of a man returning from war without having fought, but still somehow lost. Talia stood behind the counter, arms crossed, eyebrow already raised to maximum judgmental height.
Well?
She asked flatly. "I died on stage," I said with theatrical flair, "and was reborn, humbler." Bock hopped onto the counter and clucked twice. Even he sounded embarrassed.
Do you have the rent?
Define have. She sighed, shaking her head, grabbed a rag, and started wiping down the counter like it owed her money.
Boswick, if you don't pay tonight, you'll be sleeping in the stables.
Again? I gasped. Bock still has hay trauma. At that moment, the door to the tavern slammed open. Calvin stomped in, still in full glittering stage attire, and fuming like a teapot full of bad decisions. He stormed up to the counter, tossed 2 gold coins onto it with a clink, and glared at Talia.
That's for his rent, 2 nights, and if he ever shows up near me again, ever, I want the town guard summoned to lock him up for all of eternity. Or a cell sword hired to dice him up. Or a large net tight enough to bind, strangle, and constrict him to death. Do you hear me?
He stormed out. The door creaked behind him like even it was exhausted. Talia stared at the coins, then at me. Then, impossibly, she smiled. A tiny amused smirk, like the sun peeking out between 2 storm clouds of relentless disappointment.
Well, at least you're paid up now. Not sure how you did it, but you lucked out again, Boswick. However, your luck can't hold up forever.
Luck? My dear Talia, this was all a part of my master plan. Luck had very little to do with this, she snorted.
Yeah, sure. Just be sure you have more coins for me should your master plans wither away in the next couple of days.
I nodded with confidence and pride, and then settled into my usual seat near the hearth. Bock nestled beside me, pecking suspiciously at a breadcrumb that may or may not have been older than me. I raised my tankard of lukewarm ale. To failure, I said. The only thing I consistently succeed at. Bock clucked in agreement, and thus ended the day I nearly became a legendary performer. Almost, not quite. Well, not even close. But I got my room paid, Bock got breadcrumbs, and Talia didn't throw me into the alley. By my standards, a roaring success.